and welcome back to my channel. So in this video I'm going to be explaining how I revised for GCSE English, Language and Literature. One thing I would like to point out is English was probably my weakest subject. I'm still very happy with the grade I got in it in the end, but this may be less helpful than some others, but I hope this will help other people that maybe struggle with English like I did. So again, I have a notebook next to me, so if I start looking down, that is why. And yes, I'm in the same t-shirt as like the last two videos. I'm kind of having a day where I'm just filming like everything. So for English, I took Cambridge International, so CIE, English, Language and Literature. And in both I managed to get A stars, which I'm still shocked about because I don't even know how I got through GCSE English. I found it really difficult anyway, but apparently it went all right in the end. But you know, I'm happy, so I'm just gonna stop questioning it. So I'm gonna start with language. I don't know if it's the same for every exam board, but for CIE it's not very easy to revise for. Our school almost called it a non-revision paper, and pretty much the only thing you can do for it is as many past papers as you can. So yeah, the language part is not going to be very long, but the other thing that I'd recommend is making a summary of each of the different writing types, just so you're familiar with all of them. And one thing I would say is do all of them, because there was one that I didn't do, and that was obviously what happened because my teacher said it's never going to be a report. So obviously I opened the paper and it's like, write a report, and I was just like, really? Anyway, so yeah, make a summary of all of the different possible writing types that you might have to do. I don't know if that's the same in every exam board, but for us we had a passage and we had to write like another thing about that passage, which could have either been like an interview, a duologue, a report, an article, a letter, a speech. I feel like I've missed some, but that sort of thing. So yeah, just make a summary and just go over that just before the exam. That's pretty much what I did. The other thing that's good for language, which to be honest I didn't do a hell of a lot, is just read books and get familiar with different writing styles and that sort of thing, and think of it as if it was language almost. Well, one of my friends for our mock, she'd actually read the passage before because it was from a book that she'd read, so you're increasing the chances that that will happen. So yeah, just read and familiarise yourself with it. Will increase your vocabulary as well, which is always helpful. I don't know if any of the exam boards do this, but we had to pick out powerful words and phrases, and occasionally you came up to one that you didn't know what it meant, so that limited the number you could talk about, and perhaps that was the most powerful in the whole thing, but you didn't know because you didn't know what it meant. So yeah, increasing your vocabulary as much as possible is also helpful, but obviously you can't learn every word in the dictionary unless you have like an eidetic memory, which I really don't. So yeah. So moving on to literature, I'd say the most important thing is to make sure that you have read your text thoroughly. I read my texts once before we'd started studying it, and then while we were studying it, and then for one I reread it, but I didn't do that for all of them because I'm a really slow reader. So yeah, reading your text is so important. I know there are a few people in my class who actually hadn't read it before the exam, which I think is quite impressive, but yeah. I also made a synopsis of each text, so I just type up some notes because I prefer type notes, or I did for GCSE, on the book, so that then I wouldn't have to reread it if I'd forgotten the chronology or something like that. And one of my books, the chronology was really odd, so it just helped to have what happened in each chapter. And it's good for extract based essays as well. If it says on your paper from, I don't know, say Macbeth, Act 3, Scene 4, then you could go, well, this happened in Macbeth, Act 3, Scene 4. And so you can talk about the context in the play, which will make it sound like you know the play better, which will ultimately get you a higher mark. Some of the best resources I found were the CGP guides. I did quite an obscure exam board, so actually there weren't CGP guides other than for Macbeth, because obviously that's like a big one. There weren't actually that many revision resources for my exam board. But the CGP Macbeth guide, gosh, I can't speak today, was really good. I had York notes for my, for my literature, I did Macbeth, Spies, and our poems were called, what was it, Songs of Ourselves. It was like volume 1, section 5 or something. I can't actually remember, but yeah, there were no resources for the poems that were decent at all, I found. But for Spies, I used a York Notes, because apparently it used to be on the A-level, I think it was for AQA anyway, it doesn't really matter, it used to be on the A-level, so I just used the A-level resources, which obviously were a bit more advanced, but I'd kind of dumb it down a bit for GCSE, so I understood it better. But yeah, that helped. And then, yeah, for poems, there was just nothing online, but if you do a good exam board, I imagine the CGP ones are good for that too. And as with every subject, practice is absolutely key. I would say write as many practice essays as you can and get your teacher to mark them, and also explain what you did better or worse than your previous essays. So for example, for the whole, I don't know, it was probably about 1.5 years or something, I always got the same mark, 20 out of 25 consistently, which is an alright mark, but it annoyed me that I was getting it absolutely every time, depending on whether the essay was in timed conditions or not, and I just could not work out where to do better. And then I handed in one where I got a higher mark, so I got my teacher to explain what gave me those extra 3 marks from that essay. And then it just kind of, yeah, it's just good to know exactly what you're doing right or wrong, so that then you can focus on either doing that or not doing that, depending on if it's good or bad. But obviously for English you can't write an essay on absolutely everything that's possible, but essay plans are also really good. It can also just make you think, maybe do it almost under time conditions. So say we had 45 minutes for an essay in all of our exams. I don't know if it's more or less for most exam boards. So I'd give myself, I think I gave myself 6 minutes to plan normally. So I would set a time of 6 minutes and plan an essay, and work out what I'd talk about and that sort of thing. I tend to do it on extracts because that's what I liked doing in the exam. So yeah, you just write as many essay plans as you can, because obviously the more you do, the more like you are to get the actual essay. So yeah, essay plans are really, really helpful. But I found for me that I didn't struggle with coming up with the points. I found that the easiest part. I struggled with writing essays, so I actually tried to write as many as I could. Type them if you want. I don't know if anyone else has had this problem, but I managed to give myself RSI by writing too much. So I'd type some of them and write some of them and do some under timed conditions and some not, because like I said, when I handed in that one that got a higher mark, I spent ages on that one, but then when I did it under time conditions again, because I'd taken what I'd done right in that one, that mark went up. So yeah, it's always really helpful to do some under time conditions and some not, but keep a record of it. So maybe in the title put timed or untimed, so that then you can refer back to what your best is in timed conditions and work out what you can do with that. Because obviously if you spend 3 hours on an essay, it's probably going to be better than if you spend 45 minutes on one. So yeah, that is all of my tips for English. I hope this video has been helpful, and I hope to see you soon. Bye!